we should study communication to improve communication, to learn to communicate with each other better so that we can help each other to improve our understanding and effectiveness and enrich our lives through real discourse and dialogue rather than debate. And one of the things that he didn't appreciate in much academic life was to reduce philosophy to debate. So, and that's the way I was trained. Of course, I was an analytic philosopher trained in debate. And so you get up there and you state your position, you know, and then everybody attacks it, and you defend it, and you go through, you know, verbal fisticuffs, conceptual karate, or whatever you want to call it, and see who can come out on top at this particular exchange. Well, Ness said, you know, philosophy should be the search for wisdom. It should not be this kind of verbal fisticuffs. What's the point of all this? It doesn't shed any light. It just creates heat of the wrong kind. So then he's set about to completely revolutionize education in the universities of Norway. Well, I forgot to add that he stayed in Berkeley, and he was thinking of staying there longer because he was offered a position that, you know, was tenure track position. But then he got word that the University of Oslo needed a full professor to be the chairman of the department. Well, at that time, the chairman of the department of the University of Oslo of Philosophy had oversight over all programs in the universities in Norway. And so he then said, oh, well, of course, I have to take this position. Oslo was where he was born and raised. It's where all his relatives and friends and family and so on, and his family wanted to go back to Norway. So he took the position, and he happened to get there at just this opportune time. So one of the things he did was to introduce throughout the curriculum in the different universities a whole program. In the sort of first year, all students would go through this program where they would have a very broad and deep introduction to humanistic studies, philosophical studies, logic, rational reasoning, communication theory, and one of the major books for that was called Communication and Argument. And this was all then interrelated with the empirical semantics. Well, thank you.
And it's okay. We're going to be able to talk about.
Yeah. I just want to.
Yeah, you're doing great.
I want to bring this into sort of a punchline. Whatever. Anyway, so first place, practice your own philosophy. One of the aims of mature people should be to have a clearly articulated personal philosophy. You know what your values are, and you know what your priorities are. And if you have problems or difficulties, you realize that and you work them through. So when he went to Vienna, he enrolled in 14 months of intensive psychoanalysis with Hitchman, which he went to 6 days a week, an hour a day. Hitchman insisted no breaks for 14 months. So he said that really helped him deeply understand his own personal hurts that he suffered as a child. And I won't go into detail about those. But you see, this whole theme of nonviolent communication, trying to understand things, trying to have many perspectives, trying to journey to many dimensions of the mountains, the oceans, to the the different languages and the different cultures. This was all through Arnae Ness's work. So when he was talking about deep ecology, as I mentioned earlier in the meeting here, he was always saying deep ecology movement as the movement for ecological responsibility, not as a single philosophy. Unfortunately, a lot of people misinterpret him. They thought he was talking about a single philosophy everybody in the world would have to embrace. But of course that's impossible. We can't all embrace the same philosophy. We all have our own unique way of seeing things. And that's diversity in itself. You see, so we should celebrate and enjoy the diversity all around us. And if we're afraid of diversity, then we have to think, oh, well, why is this fearful to me? Well, getting back to mainstream academia then, so much of the work that we did in a highly specialized ways in the academic world turns into this continuing sort of verbal fisticuffs and who's on first and second and so on. But now more recently we have the emergence of cross-cultural, interdisciplinary approaches, and what we've been trying to do, for instance, in environmental studies, which is a program I helped develop and have been in for years. How do we develop common cross-discipline dialogue and discussion so that we can solve real problems and not just create, abstractions? Well, when I was in Oslo visiting Ness, I went to SUM, the Center for the Study of Environment and Development, which was founded in his honor, and he was a senior fellow there. And I attended a seminar of a world-class prize-winning economist. So here we are, all the fellows at SUM, and a bunch of grad students and so on, and we're sitting in this room, and this world-class economist gets up, and he's giving us all of these computer models, and all these abstract theories and formulas and stuff. And he goes on and on and on with this stuff, and then, sort of making me, well, I'm going to sleep. And so then when he was all through, he said, do I have any questions? And so, there's some questions here about, what did you mean by that? And what did you mean by this? So after the initial question, somebody raised his hand and said, Professor X, I can't remember his name, what does this have to do with the economy out there? And he smiled and looked at the person like he was from Mars. And he said, it doesn't have anything to do with the economy out there. It's pure theory. It's an intellectual model. And I've shown that that theory can be given a logically consistent account. Oh, okay. Thank you. Well, Professor Ness, I saw him in many circumstances, and one time he came to visit and he gave a talk in the department, and there was a lot of the debative activity going on. And as he was describing his personal philosophy, Ecosophy T, as being based on one ultimate norm, self-realization, exclamation point, I could just see a couple of my colleagues were just beside each other, they were scribbling, and they were just getting furious. And so he finally finished, and he said, any questions? Well, of course, they waited, and people had some clarification questions. What do you mean by that? So on. And finally, this one person started in. And he said, well, Professor Ness, your articulation, your position are totally inconsistent and self-contradictory, and it was, okay. And Ness didn't say a thing. He looked and smiled. He said, really? That's wonderful. He said, I'm glad to discover. So he says, how does that go? And he starts writing this down. So this other person starts saying, well, you see, this proposition here should have had this in there. He said, oh, that's very good, yes. Wish I had thought of that. What else? Oh, yeah, oh, there you go. So after a while, this person starts to say, wait a minute. Don't give up so easily. See, you can defend your position this way. So then he starts defending Ness's position. And Ness said, oh, that's very interesting. So then when it was all through, we were going out the door, and he's congratulated this professor, and he said, you're wonderful. He said, you really got me. And the guy said, oh, no. He says, yeah. He says, your attack was just... and he was just apologizing and saying, oh. So at the end of that, he had become a friend, you see. Now, that's his philosophy of communication. We don't have enemies. Everyone is a potential supporter of the Deep Ecology Movement, you see, or of the social justice movement. Everybody. We should never write off anybody. we seriously underestimate ourselves and others when we do that. So this ultimately is sort of the heart of his whole philosophy of communication, which in terms of connecting with what you're doing and ecology and so on, extends to the whole world. So, I mean, not just all of human life, but all of life is involved in communication. And, you know, adaptation, communication, creativity. He was a possibilist because he said as a result of contemporary science, we know determinism is out, you see. The world is filled with all kinds of possibilities and freedom and creativity. How am I doing?
We're going to do this more. So okay. So we're jumping down here, and we'll put Donella up there.